Okay, think about your bed right now. Think about those soft pillows, the carefully chosen mattress, maybe that perfectly adjusted thermostat you set right before you crawl into the covers. We kind of treat all that comfort as a given, right? But to fully understand why we sleep the way we do today, we actually have to look backward. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to explore the wildly uncomfortable, heavily armored, and honestly just utterly bizarre history of human sleep habits to find out exactly how we arrived at our modern bedtime routines.
So, how did people sleep before beds even existed? It's a fascinating question that reveals a fundamental biological paradox. Because, from an evolutionary standpoint, sleep is an absolute nightmare. Think about it. You are effectively paralyzing yourself, closing your eyes, and rendering yourself completely unconscious for 8 hours in a world filled with things that actively want to eat you. For most of human history, bedtime was anything but relaxing. It was a terrifying ordeal of just trying to survive until the sun came up, and the way our ancestors dealt with this massive vulnerability shaped the very nature of human rest. To see how we got here, we're going to track this timeline, starting in the prehistoric era, moving to ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, medieval Europe, and finally landing on today.
Let's start right at the beginning with prehistoric survival sleep. You know, when we look at early humans, we really just have to toss our modern idea of relaxation right out the window. I mean, they weren't exactly winding down with a book after a long day of foraging. They were scraping together these makeshift nests out of damp grass and leaves directly on hard, cold dirt floors. You had to deal with the moisture of the earth, the relentless presence of insects, and the biting cold. In this environment, sleep absolutely wasn't rest. It was essentially guard duty. You were literally just taking your turn to be slightly less awake than the rest of your tribe. Because closing your eyes was such a major physical vulnerability, prehistoric sleep was highly fragmented. Actually, humans physically couldn't afford to enter those long, deep cycles of REM sleep that we crave today because their brains had to remain on high alert. Imagine the sheer physiological stress of that routine. You had to constantly wake up in the middle of the night, scan the dark horizon, listen for snapping twigs, and actively make sure a saber-toothed cat wasn't stalking your camp. This hyper-arousal kept humans alive, sure, but it meant they were constantly running on a massive sleep deficit.
Which brings us to our next era, Egyptian pest control.
As human civilization developed, while the threats evolved too, the dirt floor wasn't just uncomfortable and damp anymore, it was basically an active hunting ground. So humans got creative. The invention of the bed frame wasn't actually driven by a desire for a softer surface at all. The primary motivation was getting physically elevated away from terrifying ground-level nocturnal predators. If you're sleeping out in the desert, you desperately need to put distance between your sleeping body and the scorpions, the vipers, and really just the generally dangerous vibe of the Egyptian night. Elevation literally equaled survival. And get this, if you were wealthy and powerful during this time, you didn't celebrate your elite status with a fluffy, oversized pillow. No way. You celebrated by resting your skull on a solid block of carved stone. Yes, stone. I know, it seems incredibly punishing to our modern sensibilities. The ultimate luxury was basically waking up with a severely sore neck. But in a blistering hot climate where insects are constantly crawling across the floor, keeping your head elevated, separated from the bugs, and physically cool was the absolute peak of ancient luxury.
Moving right along to Roman class sleep divides. So as we jump forward to Rome, we hit a pivotal moment where sleep officially transitions from simple survival into a massive industry of comfort. This era introduces a stark physical class divide. The poor were still making do with itchy, lumpy sacks filled with hay, wool, and reeds. Every time they shifted, their bed would loudly rustle and poke them, not to mention the localized ecosystems of bugs living inside those sacks. Meanwhile, the Roman elite were experiencing an entirely different reality, sinking into silent, incredibly soft feather beds stuffed with swan down. Comfort was now a highly sought-after commodity.
Next up, medieval demon defenses. Okay, so just when humanity was finally figuring out physical comfort, things take a wildly bizarre and deeply superstitious turn. Instead of enjoying those nice Roman feather beds, many people in medieval times actually slept entirely propped up in a sitting position. Think about the physical reality of doing that. You're dealing with stiff muscles, terrible circulation, and you require an absolute mountain of bolsters and pillows just to keep yourself propped up. Whole societies were going to sleep looking like they were stiffly posing for a royal portrait, completely wrecking your spinal alignment.
The reasoning behind this terrible posture? Well, sleep was no longer just viewed as a biological necessity, it was considered a spiritual battleground. There was this intense, pervasive fear that if you looked too much like a corpse by lying perfectly flat, demons would be tricked into thinking you're dead and come to steal your soul. Lying flat was literally for the dead, so the angle of your spine as you slept was deeply tied to your spiritual safety. You didn't just want a good night's rest, you wanted to make absolutely sure your soul was still inside your body when the sun came up.
Which finally brings us to the modern exhaustion irony.
Today, we've engineered a sleep setup that a Roman emperor literally couldn't even fathom. We've totally swapped the grass nests and the terrifying stone headrests for highly clinical, technologically advanced sleep command centers. We've built an entire arsenal dedicated to unconsciousness, right? We're using memory foam, aerospace-grade cooling gels to regulate our body temperature perfectly, smart rings that track our heart rate variability, and white noise machines precisely calibrated to block out the unpredictable sounds of the outside world.
I mean, we throw massive amounts of money at this problem. We will happily and easily drop $3,000 on a mattress, desperately trying to buy our way into 8 flawless hours of unconsciousness. The sheer scale of the modern sleep industry proves just how desperate we are to control an environment that, for most of human history, was completely and utterly uncontrollable.
But here is the great irony of all this historical progress. Despite this incredible innovation, despite being swaddled in perfect temperature control, wrapped in silent swan down or memory foam, and surrounded by curated ambient soundscapes, our very first conscious action every single morning is to blindly slam the snooze button 5 times.
So, thousands of years of innovation, and you're still exhausted? If we successfully solved the predators, elevated ourselves away from the snakes, defended our souls from the demons, and engineered the perfect physical environment, why are we still so incredibly tired? Clearly, the biological and psychological quest for a perfect night's sleep is an ongoing human journey that we just haven't quite mastered yet. Think about that tonight as you fluff your pillow, adjust your thermostat, and close your eyes. Hey, at least you aren't resting your head on a block of stone.